Here's a piece for thought. Have we underrated the job that defensive coordinator Scott Symons has actually done to this point in the year?
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right. I'll tell you why that might be here in just a moment. Welcome to Locked On SMU here on a Wednesday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Appreciate you taking the time to listen to us and make us your first listen of the day. And our episode today is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase at Game Time. Coming up on today's show, and we'll tell you more about Game Time later on. Coming up, thoughts from the depth chart release, as there was one on yesterday, so we're going to get into that. Plus, Wake Forest has an intriguing quarterback situation that either is going to be good for them or very advantageous for the Mustangs. So we'll talk about that when we close up the show. Again, I'm Grayson Singleton. Let's go ahead and jump into Scott Symons. A guy that came into the season as one of the more highly regarded up-and-coming defensive coordinators. His defense has also looked pretty porous at times, even though there are elements of it that are pretty good. So the question now becomes, has Scott Symons actually been underrated in his performance this year? And there's a couple of numbers that I think could actually back that up. Now, you're going to compare, obviously, the comp is to last year's defense when it was one of the best in the ACC. You had guys that ended up in NFL training camps, some of whom are on NFL rosters now. But it was well regarded that SMU's defense in 2024 was excellent at a minimum. This year, it has not been so. And we talked about the defense in rather unflattering ways this year. However, they might be getting close to the same production in some areas as they were a season ago. Now, before we go any further, it is worth mentioning that in some places around the country, offense is up, and you're going to see this. You're going to see this in some of the numbers that I give you. So relative to last year, we kind of have to adjust for, what's been going on year over year. But SMU's rushing defense last year, we'll start with that. SMU's rush defense was the best in the ACC last year when it gave up 100.2 yards per game over the course of the season. And remember, we still have more conference games to play out, so we're kind of just projecting here. But 100 yards per game last season was best in the ACC. You know what SMU's giving up right now in terms of rushing yards per game? 97. They're 3 yards per game better. Now, again, we still have more ACC games to go. Also, keep this in mind, too, and this is why I say we have to look at how this goes through the entirety of the year. Pitt is giving up 82 yards per game, and Miami's giving up 93. So, again, this still has time to ebb itself out. Last year, SMU, 22.1 points per game given up. This year, 22.6 points per game given up. Right on par. You want more numbers? Okay, I got you. How about takeaways? Because last season, SMU had 22 takeaways, 16 interceptions, and 6 fumbles recovered. This year, through 7 games, 10 picks, 5 fumbles recovered. So you're kind of on pace. As a matter of fact, you're over pace from last year's total. At least you would be overpaced, slightly overpaced. Sacks this year, 23. Sacks last year, SMU, 43. Again, you're right on pace with with where you were last year. All that to say, it is unanimously regarded that SMU's defense had more talent in 2024 than it does in 2025. And you're getting the same, especially tangible big play results this year as compared to last. Now, it doesn't feel the same because in the early going against Sawyer Robertson and against Josh Hoover, they were throwing the ball all over the place. But I could also argue this. Is it easier to win ball games when teams can be two-dimensional and run the ball down your throat? Or is it easier to win ball games when you're stuffing the run and forcing QBs to drop back and drop back and drop back? Especially as we continue to go on through the season and the secondary gets better. I would say I would prefer the situation where you can't run the ball. And obviously both years, teams struggle to run the ball against SMU. But the point remains is that they're still on pace to duplicate their sack total. They're still on pace to duplicate their takeaway goal. And they're 3 yards better against the run. So going all the way back to Scott Symons, he's going to figure out a way to make this secondary at least capable, functional. And I think the functionality is starting to come together in the sense that they've had a working two deep now for 3 weeks in a row. We'll get to that. We'll get more in depth in that in just a second. But they have had the same two deep for the last 3 weeks now. So there's progress there in terms of functionality. But also the coaching job that he's done while turning over both inside linebackers and then kind of turning them over again in the middle of the year because Alex Kilgore, aside from one game, hasn't really been much of a factor, and Zakai Barker has been a complete non-factor the entire year. And yes, I understand that both of them had been hurt at particular moments in time. But you turn it over to them from Kobe and Ahmad last year. You turn it over to them, and then all of a sudden they get hurt. So Brandon Booker and Brandon Maizano and Justin Medlock have to play more at inside linebacker. And then it turns out Brandon Booker and Brandon Maizano are actually pretty capable inside linebackers at the P4 level. A little bit earlier than we thought they would be or thought we would need them to be. I figure that goes to coaching. The fact that they have elevated Isaiah Robertson and Isaiah Smith into bigger roles than last year. And them two are playing good ball along with the interior of the defensive line with M'Ba and Webb. Like, I think Scott Symons gets a lot of credit for that. And when you have equal production with lesser talent, I got to say that goes to the coach. And by the way, if you want to harp on the secondary and just have that trump everything, okay, fine. Like there's no talking you out of that. But I will go back to a point that I made earlier this week. If your front six is getting it done, if your front six is putting pressure on the quarterback and making the quarterback uncomfortable while simultaneously being a brick impenetrable wall against the run, your secondary is going to look better than it otherwise would. Now, the entire tell for all of this, I think, is going to come up against Miami because Miami is a stout offensive line. So there are going to be times in that game where SMU secondary is going to have to hold up on its own. And Miami's got a hell of a receiving core led by C.J. Daniels and Malachi Toney. So that will be a tell right there. That's not to say SMU won't get any pressure on Carson Beck because they're capable, but that'll be the best offensive line that they not only have played to date, but unless they end up in the CFP, will have played the entire year. Or the ACC championship game against, Georgia or somebody like that. So, all in all, Scott Symons, I think, deserves immense credit for keeping this team in terms of the metrics that I just brought up, which are important metrics too. Sacks, getting teams behind the line of scrimmage, rushing yards per game, not allowing them to run the ball down your throat, and takeaways. In terms of that, Scott Symons deserves credit for getting the same production with less talent. And by the way, SMU's defense is still good. Now, does it rank in the ACC where you would like it to as it pertains to year over year? Okay, that's a different story. Total defense, different story. Way different story. But the outlier there is the outlier that we already have acknowledged. And that's the secondary has been playing bad. But other than that, man, especially what he's done with this front six, which if you get a front six, you're sitting pretty good. What he's done with the front six with less talent than he compared to a year ago, he's done pretty well. Coming up next, the depth chart was released. We'll talk about that and what stands out on the other side. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details, and Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every single model. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. So like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. We're also brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, corrects your form, and makes every rep safer, smarter, and more efficient and effective as well. The swivel screen is a game changer because you can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a single beat. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. That's ONE Peloton.com. Welcome back to the show. Grayson Singleton here with you. You can follow me on Twitter at Gray_Singleton2. I will say, I do not know if this is going to come to fruition, but I am working on a surprise for a show later on in the week. I'm working on it. No promises on it, but stay tuned just in case it happens. All right. Make sure you subscribe, to the YouTube channel, and also appreciate all the podcast listeners on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, so SMU released a depth chart yesterday evening, however you want to phrase it. And we're going to talk about this on our Wednesday show as I'm recording this early Wednesday morning. So everything kind of the same. Kevin Jennings, running backs TJ Harden or Chris Johnson Jr. Again, I expect TJ Harden. I like how this is rounding out. I really like how this is rounding out. You find your roles for Derek McFall, who's good in spots. TJ Harden's going to be your every down back as long as you're able to run it between the chains. And Chris Johnson Jr. just be what we come to call as a scat back. I kind of like that role for him. Just flip it out to the perimeter and, hey, somebody catch him. That's a pretty good role for Chris Johnson Jr. So I love how they're starting to figure out what's working with this running back group. And I expect the running game to continue to get better and better and better because that Clemson showing was pretty good, especially in the second half where they stopped trying to run up the middle into a brick wall between the tackles and use eye candy and deception to get Chris Johnson Jr. and Derek McFall some wide open running lanes where they just said, hey, run and don't let anybody catch you. That works pretty well for those dudes. So I love how they're finding a good rhythm with the rotation. I love how they're finding a good rhythm with the play calling and who they put in particular plays and the play design as well. So I like how that's starting to turn out. Nothing new on the offensive line. Savion Byrd is back as your starting left tackle. Parr, Bates, Nichols, Williams. Williams was kind of rolled up on a little bit in the game against Clemson. Had to come out of the game, but he's good to go, according to Coach Lashley. And on defense is where you start to see some things that we could use as talking points. Number one, so Brandon Booker is going to be your starting middle linebacker. That's nothing new with that. The weak side linebacker is Alex Kilgore or Brandon Maizano, and I think that's just flow of the game, and we're going to ride with the hot hand. No quarrels with that. No qualms with that. Kilgore was better against Clemson, led the team with 11 tackles, so he certainly deserves to be there. Brandon Maizano has been really good in a lot of spots this year, so running with those two, and obviously you're not going to play one linebacker at one position the entirety of the game, so I'm good with running with that. Justin Medlock. I mentioned him briefly earlier in the show. He is going to be on the shelf for a couple of weeks. He had a procedure, according to Coach Lashley, so It's not season ending, according to the coach, but they're going to be without him for a few weeks. So Justin Medlock not factoring into this. It's Booker, Barker, and Maizano at middle linebacker, Kilgore or Maizano, which, by the way, that kind of leaves you a little thin at linebacker. So Mark Iannaccio would be an interesting name to keep an eye on here in terms of how much run he could potentially get, because right now you've only got 4 names at this linebacker depth right now. So that's a situation to monitor, especially if they suffer another injury or ailment in that position room. Here's where this gets interesting. Let's go to corner, because Marcellus Barnes is one corner. Okay, cool. Speedy Nettles is listed as the number 1 at the opposite corner, or Smoke Robinson. And I think I interacted with a couple of you guys on this on the YouTube chat, either after the instant reaction episode or Monday's episode. Can we see more Smoke than Speedy? I think that might be the better combination right now. I think Speedy's good. Speedy's got athleticism, he's got potential, but right now I think he gives up too many catches. I think he doesn't win jump balls. He gets boxed on jump balls. And I think when teams give up a big play, generally he's in the picture. Now, again, that's not to say he's not a good player. It's not to say that, he can't be better, but he is a redshirt freshman. Smoke is a redshirt junior, and the experience shows. I would go with Smoke right now in more of the snaps. And again, it's a rotation. You're not going to play one corner every snaps. That's just not how it works in college football. That's an NFL thing. But so you're going to rotate corners, so you're going to see both of them. But I think right now, Smoke is the better player. And I would love to see the advanced numbers on this to back this up. But me, you guys, we see it with our eyes, right? We see it with our eyes that Smoke has been better than Speedy so far. That was something that really stood out to me in that Clemson game, because I believe Speedy was involved in one of the touchdowns as well. And he just seems to get cooked every once in a while. So that's why I would go with Jalen Davis Robinson right there. The rest of the secondary is pretty much the same. Deuce or Kyron Chambers. And I will say this, Kyron Chambers in his snaps has started to play better too. So that nickel spot is starting to get interesting. I think Deuce has played decent. I think he also has, and when you say play decent, there's really good reps and there's really not so good reps with Deuce Harmon. But Kyron Chambers, I think, is starting to play better too. So he's going to push Deuce for that. By the way, that's an or at the nickel. But in terms of the secondary, and I mentioned that I think Scott Symons could turn this into a capable group, there's continuity. And what you're saying is continuity, because in the secondary, ors don't freak me out. Ors don't freak me out in the secondary at all because of all the rotation that you do in college football. So ors are just, okay, cool, great. If you don't have an or, that means you feel really, really confident about a player, like they do Marcellus Barnes at that one corner spot, or with the safeties Moses and Wachovia. But that'll be an interesting one to watch in terms of how the snaps are divvied up between Harmon and Chambers. If Harmon struggles, how much run does he end up getting? How much run does Chambers end up getting in favor of him? So just keep that in mind. I think that's a talking point throughout the week and into the game, with something that a lot of you diehard Mustangs fans should keep an eye on. I think that one is. But overall, I like how this looks. I like how it looks at running back. I really like how it looks at running back. Really, really do. I like how it looks at linebacker, how it's set up there. The only thing I don't like is they seem to have a lack of depth at linebacker. So, again, Iannaccio, somebody to keep an eye on potentially getting in the game on defense for a couple of snaps, for extended snaps, relative to what he's been getting. And then also Deuce or Kyron Chambers. Deuce is going to have to hold him off. And maybe the pressure Kyron Chambers puts on him allows him to hold him off and play better. So maybe that pressure, because pressure can make diamonds or pressure can burst pipes. Which one is it going to be for Harmon? We'll see. But I think this is the first time, if I'm not mistaken, that Deuce and Kyron in that order at nickel have been listed as oars. And then the rest of the secondary, I think he's pretty solid. Just want to see more smoke instead of Speedy. Coming up next, we'll wrap up the show with Wake Forest's wild quarterback situation. Does it have any upside to it? College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, rivalries, and energy in the stands. There's just nothing like it. Y'all know this. But let's be real. You guys know this too. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. Hey, but that's why I use Game Time. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. And the app makes buying it super easy. I can even see the exact view of the field before I buy the ticket. My favorite part of the app, and I use Game Time a lot. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. All right, one more segment here on a Wednesday, Grayson Singleton, and let's talk about Wake Forest for the first time this year. Now, the Demon Deacons, believe it or not, are a pretty functional team, and we don't think of them as a functional team in terms of football, but they are. They're 4-2 on the year, just came off of shellacking an Oregon State team that I know I mentioned that earlier in the week, and some of y'all might have looked at me like I was stupid because Oregon State is 0-7. So, Oregon State's a pretty bad football team. As a matter of fact, Wake Forest, interestingly enough, their wins have come against Kennesaw State, which, by the way, was a 10-9, just ugly football game. 10-9 over Kennesaw State. They blow out West Carolina 42-10. Beat Virginia Tech, that's probably their best win. And then, obviously, 39-14 over Oregon State. 2 losses are to NC State and a 1-point loss, interestingly enough, to Georgia Tech. Now, let's talk about the quarterback situation because that's obviously going to pay huge dividends in this game. And this is the second week in a row where Georgia Tech SMU, is going into a game where the other team doesn't know who their quarterback is going to be. And that's because Robbie Ashford, remember that name? Robbie Ashford did not play last week because he was out with a thumb injury. Now, Robbie Ashford on the season, you might ask, is barely completing 60% of his passes for 2 touchdowns and 4 picks. He's been bad. He's been real bad. He is a threat in the run game. 233 yards, 4.1 yards a carry, 4 touchdowns. And that's pretty much what Robbie Ashford has been the entirety of his career. But he doesn't also get sacked much. Only been sacked 6 times. As a matter of fact, between him and Deshaun Purdy, who we'll cover in just a second, have only been sacked 6 times. So they do a good job keeping themselves upright. But Robbie Ashford, not very good. Not very good at all. So that's who the presumed starter should be, unless that injury lingers over into this week. Then there's Deshaun Purdy. Deshaun Purdy has completed 18 of 35 passes, that's 51%, for 5 touchdowns, no picks. Now, you may be thinking, oh my God, that's okay, well, maybe they should go with him. Well, Deshaun Purdy was the quarterback in this week's game against Oregon State. And Deshaun Purdy's stat line looked like this. 14 of 27 for 270 and 4 touchdowns. Okay, cool. You see the 4 touchdowns, no picks. Awesome. The 14 of 27 against a bad Oregon State team is what stands out to me. Because if you listen to how we've talked about Kevin Jennings this year, what is one thing I have consistently harped upon? Efficiency. Efficiency. And I'm sorry, but if you're getting behind the chains and you're being inefficient on 1st and 2nd down against this SMU team with the way they can rush the passer on the end, you're cooked. Okay? You are cooked. So Wake Forest is going to play a very dangerous game, with whichever quarterback they go with, because those 2 quarterbacks are wild. And when I say wild, I don't mean that in an endearing way. Like, they are wild with the football. They are wildly inefficient in their own ways. One of them throws the ball to the defense. The other throws the ball everywhere but to anybody. Okay, so, I mean, when you as a team have a completion percentage, which rounds out probably to about 56, 57, you've got problems. They did run the ball well last week, but again, against Oregon State. Over the course of the entirety of the season, Wake Forest has ran the ball for 5 yards a carry. That's what they're going to have to do to help out the quarterback. And we'll talk more about that in Thursday's episode. But that's what they're going to have to do to help out a quarterback, and neither of them are good. As a matter of fact, I can decidedly say this right now. Chris Vizina is much better. A hell of a lot better than either of these Wake Forest quarterbacks. So you're not going to face a better quarterback than you did last week, which means it's time for this defense to eat. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for turnovers. Like, go get some turnovers. Go get a pick or two. Go get a strip sack maybe. But put pressure on these guys, because that's one thing that they have managed to do is keep themselves upright. And the reason I word it like that is because I haven't watched every single one of their games, and sacks are created different. Who knows? For all they know, they could be running for their lives, but just not getting sacked. So sometimes you have to watch the games, but which could be a factor into the low completion percentages. But either way you slice it, there are two things that SMU needs to do against these dudes. Get sacks and pressure on the quarterback, and get turnovers. This should be a multi-turnover game for SMU's defense. Take the ball away. Take it away. Wake Forest is not a good team, or is a good team running the football, but they've got inefficient quarterbacks. You've got strength on strength in the run game. So if SMU holds up its end of the bargain, it's easy to see that Wake Forest could end up living behind the chains, or at least in 3rd and long. And with quarterbacks who are wild with accuracy and could have a tendency to turn the ball over, and a Wake Forest team that, by the way, under Robbie Ashford, can't score a heck of a lot of touchdowns, let's go get some turnovers. Let's keep them in uncomfortable situations and force them to play out of that discomfort, which likely will not end up well for them, whichever quarterback they go with. Because Purdy's not good. There is a number. Purdy, outside of because he threw 3 double-digit yard touchdowns. If you take those out of it, he's like 11 for 24 for like $116. And I know that's a flawed argument. I know it's a very flawed argument, but just to illustrate how he's very boom or bust, and Robbie Ashford is just mid at best. At best, he is mid. So, bad quarterbacks. You saw a better quarterback last week. Go get a couple of takeaways. Go get some sacks, and let's cover this thing. Which, by the way, this thing is a 3.5-point spread in favor of SMU. You're probably looking at that. Why the hell is it 3.5? We'll talk about that tomorrow, so come back on Tuesday. A lot of the stuff that I just ended this show with will segue over into tomorrow. So come back on Thursday. I don't know why I said Tuesday, but Thursday. Come back on Thursday. That'll do it for Locked On SMU today. And by the way, before you go, make sure for your second listen, you check out our Locked On ACC conference show hosted by Kenton Gibbs and Alex Dono, as they will take you around all the intrigue and all the storylines of the most interesting conference in college sports. From the rivalries to championships and everything in between, they are going to break it all down. So find Locked On SMU, Locked On ACC, on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll see you tomorrow as we continue to break down this matchup between SMU and Wake Forest. Take it easy, everybody.